The views expressed on this episode, as with all episodes of We Hate Your Baby Daddy, are based solely on our personal opinions and shit we heard in the streets.
The content here should not be taken as indisputable fact. This show is for entertainment purposes only, so enjoy and don't come for us.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of We Hate Your Baby Daddy. Today it's just me, Bree. Dee actually is not feeling well today, so we decided, today we were going to do like an update episode and like read our fan submissions and everything. But since she's not feeling well, we decided I'm just going to tell you guys a story about a pretty evil baby daddy. Which you probably saw in the episode name. His name was, or possibly still is, Larry Hillblom, because it's not really clear whether he's dead or alive. Yeah, that's how evil he is. And technically, it's a historical baby daddy episode because he was born in like 1943 and he may or may not have died in 1995. So, yeah, 1995 was how long ago? I want to say like almost 30 years ago. I know. I'm sorry if that's making some of you guys feel pretty old right now. So anyway, before we get into Larry, um first one pretty important update. So we actually updated the name of our Instagram page. It's now WHY, we hate your WHY, Baby Daddy Pod. So people know it's a podcast because I guess I was causing some confusion, but now it's Y Baby Daddy Pod at Instagram. And we don't really have other social media right now. I mean, no, we have TikTok. But the Instagram is where you'll get our like funny updates and content and stuff like that. So besides that, in the next episode, hopefully, if our dearest D is feeling better, then we will do our fan submissions because there's some crazy baby daddy stories that have been submitted, and I cannot wait to share those with you guys. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into the episode. All right. So it is just the solo act, me, Brie, by myself. But I'm going to tell you a story about a dude who you might not have heard about. I'm sure you guys have heard of the company DHL. It's a shipping company. It was started back in like 1969, and there were three founders. There was Adrian Dalsey, Larry Hillblom, and Robert Lynn. So Dalsey, Hillblom, Lynn, DHL. They started basically these three guys. They were like, hey, let's start a company where if people like lawyers, for example, needed to have original paperwork overnighted to their client, they would pay pretty handsomely to have a guy get on a plane, take the documentation to where it needed to go and fly back. So they were like, let's make a company out of this. So they called it DHL. And, eventually the company became so popular, Dalsey, Hillblom, and Lynn became pretty wealthy. I mean, billionaires. As we all know, DHL is still a pretty big company. They have over 300,000 employees. And now, they ship all over the world. But, this story today is going to be about Larry. So, Larry Hillblom, he was a pretty nerdy dude from Kingsburg, California. Like I mentioned earlier, he was born in 1943. So he started out like going into law, but then he was the one who was like, I think a courier service, could be more profitable. Pretty smart thinking because as we see, DHL did become very popular. So Larry was primarily shipping these documents for his first client overseas. Well, I guess not technically overseas, but to Hawaii, right? So, you do have to go across the Pacific Ocean, pretty far to get from California to Hawaii. So he was doing that. He would also get other passengers to take shipments of documents and whatever overseas. And, that's pretty much how DHL started. They just kind of grew this business out of taking these trips to Hawaii. And then at some point in the 1980s, Larry decided that he was going to move to like an island in the Western Pacific. It was called Saipan, which the area that he moved to was kind of a tax haven. He could, run businesses in Asia without, running afoul of the U.S. Embargo there. So he had projects and businesses that he was developing in the Philippines, Vietnam, and Hawaii. And so he spent a lot of his time in Southeast Asia working. And he also, as I mentioned, he was very wealthy, so he had a lot of vintage planes. And he would fly them himself, or he would hire a pilot to fly them. This is going to be important later. During that period, he fathered several children that I guess it kind of got to a point where he just did not want to acknowledge all of these children. I mean, he didn't have any, he wasn't married. He didn't have any children in America. He had several women claiming to, that he fathered their children. And it was very obvious that it was him. I mean, for obvious reasons, they were these mixed kids. But anyway, there's no record of whether he really acknowledged them or contested it, but there is a record of the fact that he had a will that he put together in 1982, where he said that the University of California, San Francisco, UCSF, would receive his entire estate. In this will, he did not mention any kids. Apparently, either most or all of his known children were born after this will was written. And the reason why that's important is because in 1995, allegedly, Larry Hillblom died in a plane crash, in one of his vintage planes. And it was a bit strange because it's not really a death more than it is like a disappearance. I mean, it was a seaplane. It crashed on May 21st, 1995. And it was a flight going from, I don't know if you say Pagan or Pagan, but it's like Pagan Island in the Marianas Archipelago in the Northwest Pacific Ocean. It was going to Saipan, where he lived. And there were only 2 bodies found from that crash. So it was the pilot, Robert Long, and a business partner who I guess is unnamed. Their bodies were found, but Hillblom's body was never found. And it says around a quarter of the plane was recovered from the crash. I find that really interesting because, there was no evidence, I mean, in my opinion, that he was even on that plane, right? I mean, I don't want to turn this into a conspiracy show, but I just find it very odd. The timing, the fact that these women were coming forward saying that, he was statutorily raping them, he impregnated them. There were about 8 different women that were coming forward saying that they had children by him. And the weirder thing beyond this fact that they never recovered his body. So one of his mansions in Saipan, when they were investigating, what happened, how can we prove paternity? When they were just trying to figure out what to do, this man had scrubbed his entire mansion from top to bottom with muriatic acid so nobody could recover DNA. And then they found out that he had buried all of his possessions underground in the backyard. So, I mean, they were first like wiped clean and then buried in the backyard. And that's like his toothbrushes, his combs, hairbrushes, his clothes, buried in the backyard. So, what that does, especially in a hotter country like Southeast Asia, or a hotter part of the world like Southeast Asia, that makes it so it's unusable for DNA testing. So, all of these people who were claiming that Larry Hillblom fathered their children, they were getting frustrated. I mean, this billionaire died. He's not taking care of all of these kids that he allegedly fathered. And I mean, they would be entitled to millions, hundreds of millions of dollars each, right? So it's a big deal and they deserve that. So Larry Hillblom's mother and his siblings, they did not want to submit their DNA. I believe that they didn't want to acknowledge that Larry was out here doing the do like he was in Southeast Asia. I think that, they probably stood to get a little piece of the pie and didn't want to share it. I mean, in my opinion, that's really fucked up and really evil because the kids were entitled to that. So eventually, the lawyer who he was a man from Guam, his name was David Luan, and his co-counsel Barry Israel from California, they worked together to, file claims against the Hillblom estate. And basically, all of the women and girls that Larry was messing around with were kind of like spread out, throughout Southeast Asia. But these two guys kind of worked together to bring them together, bring all the kids together. What they ended up doing was testing the DNA of all of the children. And when they did that, it kind of determined like all of these people spread out through Southeast Asia have similar DNA, which, ipso facto kind of leads them to believe that they have the same paternity. So it was a very strong case for Larry being their father. So after that, eventually, they got a court order for Larry Hillblom's family to submit to DNA testing. And again, this was a big money case. So I believe that they had a duty to submit to it. And it's good that these two lawyers were able to force that, because otherwise they just weren't going to, which is really fucked up. But anyway, the test confirmed that 4 of the 8 claimants were Larry Hillblom's children. And so it was a Vietnamese child named Lori Nguyen and 2 Filipino children, Helion Quartero and Mercedita Feliciano. And there was also Larry Hillblom Jr. of Palau. These 4 children were fathered by Larry Hillblom. And so after taxes, I think they each got around $40 million. So 40 million times 4. Listen, I'm not a mathematician. But I mean, that's a good chunk, and that's great. They deserve that. You don't get to just go father spread your seeds out all over the world and then not take care of your kids. I mean, that's a shitty baby daddy move. But anyway, I digress. Apparently, the remaining $240 million didn't go to other stuff from his fortune. They went to the Hillblom Foundation, which then donated the funds to UCSF for medical research. And, the only reason that I even know about this is because I saw a documentary about it in 2009 where this director basically documented all of the controversy that took place after he died. You know, that I just mentioned about him like scrubbing the mansion clean, hiding evidence, the fact that his body was never recovered. I mean, it was weird, right? It's like, this is one of the more heinous baby daddies. Like, I just don't understand how someone can be so crazy. Just acknowledge the kids. I mean, he's like Steve Jobs level crazy. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you want to hear about historical bad baby dads, Steve Jobs is horrible, but was horrible to his daughters. But, you know, Larry, it's like, come on, really? You're gonna scrub your mansion clean and fake your death to avoid paternity? And listen, to be fair, it's possible that maybe one of his family members went behind his back after he died and like scrubbed the mansion and hid his stuff. But I mean, I don't know if I really believe that. The fact that his body was never recovered, I just find that to be so suspicious. So that's our story. I mean, these kids at least, you know, got something. I don't really know what has happened since that film came out in 2009 to now in 2023. But I'm just glad that that's how it turned out. But I mean, you know, faking your death to avoid paying posthumous child support. I mean, if we're having a rating scale, which we just come up with these rating scales on the spot, we never really settled on what our actual rating scale would be, and that's totally fine. But if I was to rate him on a scale of like baby daddies that we've already talked about, from let's say number one being Kevin Federline, pretty innocuous, shitty baby daddy, but you know, like he hasn't killed anybody, to like Thomas Jefferson, who literally enslaved his own kids, I would put Larry Hillblom probably actually at a 4.5 under Thomas Jefferson, because he didn't enslave anybody, but he was a statutory rapist. And then he allegedly faked his own death to escape having to take care of these poor innocent children who didn't ask to be here. So I would say, you know, he didn't enslave them, but he was pretty fucking bad. And with that, I would say, Larry Hillblom, we hate you, bro. We hate you. Nice one. Good job. So anyway, like I said, it was a very special episode. Just me talking you guys' ear off for 20 minutes. I hope you enjoyed it. And I cannot wait until Dee's feeling better and is back and we can do our fan submissions and bring you guys another episode of We Hate Your Baby Daddy. So hope you loved it. Please feel free to leave a 5-star review. If you feel like it was less than 5 stars, just keep it pushing, you know. We don't need to know about it. But feel free to answer our Q&A on Spotify. You can also DM us on Instagram. We do reply. I do talk to people who tell us that so far they love the show. They love hearing about how like famous baby mamas like Grimes or like Britney Spears, like how, you know, they kind of have to deal with shitty baby daddies just like we do. So feel free to send us a message, tell us about your baby dad, and definitely respond to the polls. We have some pretty good polls that we post when we post a new episode. So, you know, feel free to check those out, follow, subscribe, and we will see you next week. Thanks for listening. Bye.